Kaptain, and today I'm going to be reviewing and talking about the Pathfinder Extinction Curse Adventure Path Part 1, The Show Must Go On. So this is Part 1 of 6, as you can see there, and this is basically four games worth at least. You could actually probably stretch out a little more, but this is at least 4 games worth of material in the beginning of the adventure path, the Extinction Curse, of which, of course, there'll be 5 more parts. So I'm going to start with, this was published by Paizo, and I want to give a big thank you to Paizo for sending me this copy of The Show Must Go On to review and do content with, and read and enjoy and play with, etc. So thank you, Paizo. Now, this was written by Jason Tondro. I'm going to show his name right there. Though there were quite a few people who actually had some part to do with the creation of this book. So there's a lot of people involved with this. So let's start with, what do you get inside of The Show Must Go On, Extinction Curse Part 1 of 6, when you buy it? So the first thing is, the first section of the book, when you open it up, is the first adventure, which is Chapter 1, Murder in the Center Ring. Now, I'm going to keep the storyline spoiler-free in that I will not tell you the end result of these 4 games. I will also not tell you the beginnings of the second, third, or fourth games, because that would give that away. But I do want to, I don't think it's giving anything away to talk about the very beginning of the first game, because it's the sort of thing you learn within your first 3 minutes of playing. And I also don't think it's giving anything away to talk about the feel and the style of games 2, 3, and 4 in this Adventure Path book. So, all right, so you open it up and you get right before you start the first adventure, you get a quick blurb on what it's like living in a traveling circus, the setup in regard to what's going on with your particular traveling circus, which your particular traveling circus is a circus called the Circus of Wayward Wonders. Now, this circus had split off not long ago from a larger traveling circus who's run by a individual who runs it kind of like a crime boss, and is very upset that some of her former performers have gone off on their own, gone to a different isle. In this case, this takes place predominantly on the Isle of Erin, which is a smaller isle right off of Kortos, which is, the isle that the city of Absalom is on, which is like the center of the world in Golarion, the Pathfinder world. So you're going to be starting on this smaller isle, which is a little bit off the beaten path, if you will, but near the big hustle and bustle of Absalom, which is like the unofficial capital of the world. And you've gone over here to this smaller isle to do a circus show at a smaller community on this smaller isle off of the larger isle of Kortos. Now, at the beginning of the first game, what happens is the show is about to start, and the whole town has shown up for this big show. They don't usually get decent-sized circuses or other sorts of entertainment out here, so it's a big deal for them. So they're all here, and the ringleader has been murdered. And you just find this out right before the show. So 2 things you got to do in the first adventure. One is you got to follow through with the show. You actually have to do the show. The livelihood of everyone involved in the circus would be destroyed. The circus would be ruined if the show doesn't go on with a packed house like this, expecting a show. But in addition, you also have to conduct a murder investigation. And also, you kind of have to keep the people watching and the people performing safe when you know there's a murderer on the loose. This is one of the most brilliant introductions to a storyline I have ever seen. It's incredibly gripping, incredibly fun. What a wonderful mix of serious, gritty, murder mystery and lighthearted circus performance. And I really got to give it to them. Jason Tondro and anyone else who helped him with this storyline, they did an amazing job. I love this. This first adventure is absolutely phenomenal. It is really, really, really one of the best introductory adventures I've ever seen for any role-playing game ever. I love it. And especially since you're supposed to start this adventure at level 1, this winds up being a really great introduction to the world as well as the adventure that's going to be going forward. So you, now, not giving too much away, the adventure, the first part, which is Murder in the Center Ring, will take you up to page 15 in the book. Now, once you get past page 15, that's the end of the first adventure. And after your players play the first adventure, they should be level 2. The idea behind this is that you should get enough experience from each part of the adventure to level up, which means after playing all 4 of the adventures and you leave the content of this book, you should have all your players be at level 5, which is, going to set you up for the next book. Now, the second adventure is kind of an investigation with some combats and some other types of encounters as well. One of the things I really like about the first one, where it gives you a crash course on running the circus in the first adventure, is lots of the encounters are not combat based. A lot of them are just succeeding at circus performances and such. That tradition continues on, even though there's more in the way of combats in the second mission. There's also lots of non-combat based encounters, which is really cool. The third adventure is more of a dungeon crawl, if you will. Again, I don't want to give too much away about what's going on, but the third and fourth adventures are more dungeon crawls, though there are some puzzle solving and some non-combat based encounters, or at the very least, encounters that could be non-combat oriented if you play them right. I say right, but there's really no right or wrong way. You could do them combat if you are a combat heavy party and don't really want to spend the time thinking about ways to resolve them without combat. But and there are also lots of traps and other things mixed in with these adventures as well, so you do have trap encounters. Boom. Now, the fourth adventure brings you up to page 57 in the book. Now, after that, you move on to the next section, which is Life in the Circus. Now, Life in the Circus is a very interesting section where there is a full rule set in here for how to fully manage the circus. It includes what you need to do to advertise and build up hype, as well as what you need to do to have the acts go off well, and how to design acts for each of your players. And it talks about, like, well, what are some of the good skills your players have, and what sort of acts could you build around them? So if you had a rogue type character and one of their big skills was thievery, they could do a Harry Houdini type act where they get out of their locks. Or if you have a magic user, they could do a magic based act. I mean, there's all sorts of different sorts of things that you can do regardless of what type of character you're using. And it fully explains exactly how you're going to calculate whether the show is a success or a failure, whether or not you made money, and how much money you made. And then that money can be put back into buying lots of stuff to help upgrade your circus. This micromanaging of the circus is awesome. This section is fantastic. They do have an option in here, which I like that they included, for a more light managing of the circus. But my feeling is, if you're going to play this game, you're going to want to manage the circus. And then if you do, they have here a circus show sheet, which you can fill out when you are planning the different acts in your circus for each performance, which is awesome. Yeah, this chapter is really pretty great. I love the detail they go into in managing the circus. And this is actually a pretty chunky chapter. It goes from page 59 all the way up to page 69. So you have 10 full pages with lots of text on them. There are some illustrations here and there. It's actually, most of the pages are mostly text. Lots of rules, which is really cool, especially if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of running the circus. Next, we have the Adventure Toolbox. Now, the Adventure Toolbox is a full explanation for you, the Game Master, of what is actually going on behind the scenes in the world, in the storyline that is going to continue on through this grand adventure path, the extinction curse. What are the motivations of the NPCs and the villains? a brief description of what's going to go on in the other 5 installments of this adventure path. Then you've got some new rule stuff. So there's a series of edges in here, which are fantastic. I love these. So these are edges specifically for being either an acrobat or a juggler in the circus. So if you want to more specialize on things you can do in your act, you can take these edges, but they also will have combat-based effects. They give you extra effects. So for instance, the first edge you can take towards becoming a juggler is the juggler dedication. So juggler dedication requires you to be at level 2 and to have a minimum dexterity of 14. You become trained in performance, so you get a free skill out of it. If you're already trained in performance, you instead become trained in a skill of your choice. So that right there is pretty good. Then you also get the juggle skill feat, and then it also opens up lots of other edges you can get as time goes on to get other cool abilities towards juggling. So if you move past over here, the juggle skill feat is actually a feat that tells you how it is that you can juggle. Now this doesn't have really like a big combat oriented effect, but it's cool. You actually now have the ability to juggle in game. Now the next bit of rule section after all these lovely edges is Circus Weapons. Now these are not very powerful weapons generally speaking. Most of them do 1d4, 1d6 damage. One of the most interesting is a fire poi, which a poi are those, there's actually a picture of what they look like here, where they are these chain or rope objects with weights on the end that someone would do in a physical display where they're swinging them around. Fire poi are those but flammable and lit on fire, and if you actually were to use these in combat, they do 1d4 bludgeoning damage in addition to 1d4 fire damage, which makes them one of the more interesting things. And they also have agile, backswing, finesse, and twin, because they're a pair of weapons. So they're one of the more interesting things. Most of the other things are really more about looking dangerous while being used in the circus, so they're really not that deadly for fighting, but it's interesting that they have rules for them, especially if you want to make a very circus-oriented character, if you want your character to start really focusing in on their juggling or acrobatic acts. And one of the coolest ones is they have, if you want to make a whip-based character, they have a scorpion whip, which actually is a whip that can do lethal damage, versus the normal whip, which only does non-lethal damage. So that is a really cool, actually kind of like upgraded option of a basic weapon from the book. After this, we get into some environmental spells. There's lots of like weather-based spells, which are really cool new spells. And then we have bad guys. So now, in regard to this game, you've got a bunch of bad guys that you have listings on finding them in the bestiary. But then there's a bunch of bad guys that are listed in the back. But in addition to that, in addition to the new bad guys, new monsters, new creatures listed in the back of this book, there's also some new bad guys, monsters, creatures in the back of this book that are not in this adventure. So they just like give you some bonus creatures that you can have show up if you need your players to have an extra encounter and get some extra experience, or you want to do, let's say you're falling behind on experience, you decide to do a whole extra game that is just sort of like a side story to help you boost up experience. There's some extra creatures in here, even above and beyond the stuff that is needed for this adventure and the stuff from basic bestiary to just throw in there. Plus, then they have full, huge 2-page spreads on 2 of the main villains that show up during this section of the storyline. And that's the end of the information you have in this book. The show must go on. Paperback, full color printing, total of 91 pages of material. Now, what are you going to need to run this? So, bare minimum, you must have the Pathfinder core rulebook, 2nd edition, and the bestiary, regular bestiary, 2nd edition. Now, most of the villains in here are listed as references and will give you page numbers for the regular bestiary, or they will be referenced to the back of the book. So, there are 2 villains, 2 antagonists or monsters that are in here that have a strange reference where they say Pathfinder Bestiary 6, and then another number, which I originally thought meant that they were from Bestiary 6, which was weird because they haven't redone that for 2nd edition yet. But then I realized the reason it was in there, and it said, in both of their cases, it said weak, and then the creature that they were. It was because it was referring to page 6 of the Pathfinder Bestiary, where there is an area, of course, where they have rules for level adjusting the characters. So it's meant to level adjust them down one level, and then they are in the main bestiary. So I almost thought I was going to have a gripe from those 2 entries, but it's not. It's actually all you need to run this campaign. The only books you need to run this campaign, other than the books of the adventure path itself, are the Pathfinder Core Rulebook for 2nd edition and the Pathfinder Bestiary for 2nd edition. There's a couple minor issues with side storyline stuff in here that I would change personally, but you're the game master, you can always change things. And these are the minor storyline stuff that I was talking about that I might have a gripe with is so minor that it's literally just changing a line or 2 of dialogue for stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with the main storyline. So it is literally that minor. Overall, this is fantastic. It is 4 adventures that are a fantastic introduction to the world that will bring you up to level 5 with your players, set you up for future adventures, give you lots of experience with all different kinds of encounters, combat encounters, circus encounters, performance encounters, trap encounters, puzzle encounters, all the sort of things that you're going to want to gain experience with. And then in the back, it's like a mini source book with tons of extra rule content. Edges, spells, weapons, and monsters. Even monsters that are, like I said, not needed for these 4 games, which is pretty freaking awesome. Okay, so that's a general idea of what you get in here. Now, it's time for me to rate this. I'm going to give this a 9.5. This is fantastic. I really, really enjoy this book. I'm going to be getting very soon a Pathfinder group together, and we're going to be playing, and I've decided after reading this, I'm going to run this adventure for them. Because I love it. It's fantastic. I think the introduction is great. I love the concept of in addition to adventuring and going on a grand adventure to maybe save the world kind of thing, which that's the sort of thing you always do in adventures. In addition to that, they're also going to be running a circus, and that's pretty cool. I think it's really fun. I think they're going to really enjoy it. So when I do get that group together, I'm going to try to record those and put them up on the channel, so stay tuned for that. Of course, I will have to put a spoiler alert warning in there in case you yourself are planning on playing The Show Must Go On or The Extinction Curse. Of course, if you're running it as a game master, no need to worry about spoilers. Now, 9.5 out of 10 is because this is darn near perfect in regard to a great starting adventure path to get your characters playing in the world of Golarion, the Pathfinder world, introducing to the type of stuff you do during the game, introducing them to the kind of villains and monsters and antagonists they're going to face, introducing them to the system. It's fantastic. I really, really enjoy this. So this is my thumb is way up on this one. So there you go. Do you have any comments, questions, or concerns either on the product, The Show Must Go On, Part 1 of 6 of the Extinction Curse Adventure Path for Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Boy, that's a mouthful. Or this video, feel free to put them in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this review of this role-playing game product and you'd like to see me do more reviews like this, be sure to give it a like. Share it on all forms of social media. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Kaptain. That's Kaptain spelled with a K on YouTube. And hit that little bell icon on my channel so you get alerts every time I upload a new video. And until next time, game on.